Imagine standing on stage in front of 300 people. The spotlight is hot, the air dense with silence. You've done this 100 times before, presentations, panels, product launches, but this time something feels off. Your vision starts to blur. The room spins slightly. You open your mouth to speak, but no words come out. Your chest tightens. Then, just like that, your body locks up. You freeze, right there, mid-sentence. That was Liam's reality. A man who lived for control, who built his reputation on being the calmest person in every storm. He was a senior executive in Manhattan, the kind of person who had 5 calendars, 2 phones, and 0 free minutes. His superpower was predictability, precision. His fear, losing grip. And on that stage in Chicago, during a high-stakes corporate summit, his worst fear came true. A full-blown panic attack, no warning, no mercy, just a sudden unraveling in front of a crowd, cameras, colleagues, and himself. That moment shattered something in Liam. It wasn't just the embarrassment. It was the realization that the empire of control he built was actually a cage. For years he'd been operating like a machine, no room for weakness, no space for doubt. But machines break, and he just had. When he got off that stage, his friend, Marcus, was already waiting backstage. Marcus didn't ask if he was okay. He just said, "You need to disappear, now, or this will keep happening." And for the first time, Liam didn't argue. He nodded, silent. They booked him a remote cabin in Lake Tahoe. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just forest, sky, and time. Liam protested at first. What about the meetings, the pitches, the deals? But Marcus looked him dead in the eyes and said, "What's the point of winning if you're not even alive enough to enjoy it?" That line haunted him for days. At first, solitude was torture. His mind screamed in 1,000 directions. His muscles twitched like a phone on vibrate, always expecting a ping, a call, a crisis. But with no signal, he had no choice. He walked, he breathed, he listened. And then, slowly, the chaos started to fade. One morning, sitting by the lake, watching the sun rise through a crack in the clouds, he remembered a quote he'd read but never lived. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Marcus Aurelius had whispered to him from centuries ago. In that moment, something in Liam cracked. Not in the way things break, but in the way seeds split before they grow. He realized he'd been clinging to everything, timelines, outcomes, perceptions, as if his worth depended on perfect execution. But control had become his prison, and letting go was the first taste of freedom. When he returned to the city, he didn't go back the same way. He cleared his calendar, blocked off time for nothing. He showed up to meetings differently, present, less anxious, more human. Strangely, his team became more productive. Ideas flowed better. People felt safer. And for the first time in years, Liam did too. Here's the truth most of us don't want to hear. The harder you try to control every detail, the faster life spins out of your hands. Like grabbing a handful of sand, squeeze too tight, and it slips right through. Letting go isn't quitting. It's choosing to stop fighting the current and start trusting the flow. It's believing that maybe, just maybe, life knows what it's doing better than you do. And once you feel that kind of peace, it's addictive. So before we continue this journey together, do me a favor. If this story hits somewhere deep inside, you subscribe to this channel. Your support helps bring more stories like Liam's to light. Stories that don't just entertain, but transform. We're building something powerful here, and your click is what fuels the next video. Now here's a question for you. What do you believe holds more power in your life? A. Constant control over every outcome. B. The ability to let go and trust. The process, type your answer in the comments, A or B, and let's talk about it. Your story might just start with that one choice. The morning Liam returned to Manhattan, the city hadn't changed, but something inside him had. And it was most evident not in how he spoke, not in the decisions he made at work, but in the first hour of his day. You see, for years, Liam's mornings had followed a strict pattern. Alarm at 5:30 a.m., coffee on autopilot, email before sunrise, calendar check before breakfast, and a mind already racing toward things that hadn't even happened yet. His mornings were a sprint, a battlefield, and without realizing it, he was starting every day in reaction, defensive, rushed, on edge. But after Lake Tahoe, he began to see the first hour of the day as sacred. Not tactical, not productive, but sacred. He started waking up slowly, sometimes even without an alarm. He'd open his curtains and let the light pour in. Instead of grabbing his phone, he sat on the edge of his bed and just breathed. Not for any reason other than to feel what it meant to be alive, to be still, to start from zero. One morning, as the city's early chaos murmured outside his window, Liam did something he hadn't done in years. He just listened. He listened to the hum of the radiator, the distant sound of heels on the sidewalk, the gentle rustle of wind through buildings. There was no productivity in that moment, just presence. But strangely, it gave him more energy than 5 espressos ever had. He began building small rituals. One of them was a playlist, songs that grounded him. Sometimes it was Bill Withers, other times instrumental jazz, or a single haunting piano track that pulled him inward. These weren't background noises, they were cues. They told his nervous system, "This is your space. You're safe here." Another ritual, a daily intention, not a goal, not a task list. Just a quiet statement, written on a yellow sticky note that sat beside his coffee mug. Some mornings it said, "I will respond, not react." Other days, presence over performance. These weren't about achieving, they were about aligning. And for Liam, that changed everything. He noticed how his mornings used to feel like he was stepping onto a treadmill already running at full speed. Now it felt like he was stepping into himself first, tuning his instrument before the orchestra began. That one shift, starting with stillness instead of stimulation, echoed through every part of his day. What surprised him the most wasn't how different he felt, but how different others treated him. His team responded to his calmer tone. Meetings ended sooner. Decisions came faster. The office, once always buzzing with urgency, had started adopting his slower, more grounded rhythm. Liam didn't become a monk. He didn't quit coffee or cancel all morning meetings. He simply redefined the purpose of that first hour. It was no longer a countdown to work. It was a check-in with himself. And that single decision became the foundation of his inner peace. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Seneca didn't open his days with noise. He opened them with reflection, a pen, a page, and the quiet question, "What shall I be today?" Not in the eyes of others, but in the mirror of his own mind. So let me ask you, what does your first hour say about you? Do you wake to the chaos of the world, or do you wake to yourself? What would change if, tomorrow morning, you gave yourself 10 minutes of undistracted time? Not for journaling unless you feel like it. Not for meditation unless it calls you. Just 10 minutes of being fully awake, without being immediately pulled into someone else's agenda. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You don't need a sunrise on a mountaintop. You just need a moment that's yours. Because how you begin isn't just how you feel. It's how you move, how you decide, how you relate. Your mornings are not a warm-up lap, they're the map. And if you keep starting the day with noise, don't be surprised when the rest of it echoes confusion. But if you start with clarity, even a tiny slice of it, you carry that clarity with you. Into your work, into your relationships, into your vision for the life you want to build. And here's the truth. You deserve to begin your day in a way that supports your soul, not just your schedule. So tomorrow morning, try this. Wake up, sit still, and ask yourself, what kind of energy do I want to carry today? Then let that answer guide you. Everything else can wait. Rachel sat in the corner booth of her favorite Austin coffee shop, eyes fixed on the untouched latte growing cold in front of her. Around her, life buzzed on, People tapping away at keyboards, baristas laughing behind the counter, indie music humming softly overhead. But inside her mind, everything was loud, crowded, confused. The funding for her wellness app had fallen through. Her CTO had quit with little warning. And the user data, the very numbers that once gave her hope, were now sharp reminders of everything unraveling. Just a few months ago, she had felt unstoppable, purpose-driven, alive. But now every day felt like a blur of decision fatigue, anxiety and self-doubt. What do I do first? How do I fix this? Why is everything falling apart? And then, one morning, exhausted by her own thoughts, Rachel left her apartment without her laptop, without her planner, without her phone. She just started walking. At first, it felt aimless. She didn't know where she was going, but she needed space, physical space, to match the space her mind was begging for. She found herself circling Lady Bird Lake, a notepad in her jacket pocket. And somewhere between the bridge and the second bend in the trail, she stopped. She sat down on a bench, pulled out her notebook, and started writing, not action plans or to-do lists, but simply what was circling in her head. The worries came out raw and unfiltered. What if I've failed? What if I'm not cut out for this? How do I keep going? But by naming them, something shifted. They lost their sting. They became thoughts, not facts. That one act, taking the chaos out of her head and putting it on paper, became her new ritual. Every morning, Rachel walked for 20 minutes with her notebook. She called it her mental sweep, and each day she got better at sorting her thoughts. Some were actionable, some were emotional, some were just noise. The act of separating them was like cleaning a foggy mirror. Slowly, she began to see herself again. She drew 3 boxes at the top of each page: urgent, emotional, release. Into each box, she dropped one worry. It wasn't about solving everything. It was about giving shape to what felt formless. Within weeks, Rachel found herself making decisions again, not out of fear, but from clarity. She hired a new developer. She rewrote her pitch. She let go of partnerships that didn't align. And most importantly, she reconnected with the very reason she started her company, to help people like her find space in a noisy world. The Stoics had a word for this kind of shift: prohairesis, the power of choice. They believed that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can always choose how we respond. That's not just philosophy, it's neuroscience. When you pause, sort, and name your stressors, you give your brain a chance to move from panic to problem solving. Rachel's breakthrough wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a single moment of genius. It was a practice, a return to herself each morning, a promise to stop letting the loudest thought win. One afternoon, while reflecting on how far she'd come, she wrote a line in her notebook that later became the opening of her relaunch speech. Your mind is not a courtroom. It's a garden. Stop judging every thought. Start planting what you want to grow. And maybe that's the invitation for all of us. When life feels like a flood of stress, don't try to outswim it. Step aside. Let the water pass. Then take stock. Write it out. Name it. Sort it. And you'll see. There are solutions hiding in the noise. But only a quiet mind can hear them. You don't need more motivation. You need more stillness. Not to escape your problems, but to see them for what they really are. Stepping stones, not walls. Tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, take a walk, even just around the block. Carry a notebook. Dump the mental clutter onto the page. Sort it, then move forward. Not with panic, but with presence. Because the mind, when calm, becomes a compass. And when you learn to read it, you'll always find your way back to clarity. Just like Rachel did. In a quiet kitchen in Portland, long before the first customer arrived, Zara moved slowly, purposefully. Her knife glided through an onion with the grace of someone who had learned, through pain, not pride, that speed doesn't equal skill. Years ago, she thought otherwise. When she opened her restaurant, her days were defined by urgency. Orders, suppliers, spreadsheets, social media. She juggled them all, believing that to be successful, she had to move fast, faster, fastest. But what speed gave her in momentum, it stole in meaning. One night, overwhelmed and overtired, she rushed through prep. Her knife slipped. The cut was deep and the kitchen fell into chaos. Her staff panicked. She sat in urgent care, bandaged and shaken, staring at her reflection in the silver sink. That was the moment she realized something terrifying. Her dream had become a blur, and she didn't remember the last time she actually enjoyed the process of creating. That accident, painful as it was, became her pivot. She returned to the kitchen with a new mantra: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. At first, it felt unnatural. The world rewarded hustle. Investors expected scale. But Zara wasn't chasing scale anymore. She was chasing soul. She began each morning before sunrise, alone in her kitchen, preparing one ingredient at a time. She chopped slowly, measured carefully. She noticed the texture of basil leaves, the sound of olive oil sizzling on cast iron, the warmth of bread rising beside the oven. These weren't tasks. They were rituals. The kind that brought her back to why she fell in love with cooking in the first place. Customers began to notice something different, not just in the food, but in the space. It felt calmer, warmer, like every dish had been made by someone who wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. Her staff changed too. Without meaning to, they mirrored her energy. Fewer mistakes, less tension, more laughter. One line cook said, "It feels like we breathe better in here now." Zara's transformation wasn't about slowness for the sake of being slow. It was about precision, presence, and peace. She wasn't doing less, she was doing better. With less wasted motion, less emotional friction, more intention. And in time, the pace became her power. The Stoics would have understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, amid the weight of empire, wrote often about the importance of calm. He didn't believe leadership was about urgency. It was about clarity. A mind in chaos can't make wise decisions. A mind that's steady, even under pressure, sees what others miss. Zara embodied that now. She adopted something like a rhythm. 90 minutes of focused work followed by 10 minutes of stillness. Sometimes she just stood in the alley behind the restaurant listening to birds. Sometimes she simply sipped tea in silence. But those moments, they reset her. They reminded her that she was not the machine. She was the artist. And maybe you've felt that too. Maybe your life has become a checklist and you've mistaken movement for momentum. Maybe you've rushed through so much that you can't even remember what it feels like to be present. But here's the truth. Calm is a strategy, not a luxury. It's how you stop burning out. It's how you make better decisions. It's how you create work and relationships that actually last. You don't have to quit your job or move to Portland to live this way. You just have to slow down enough to ask, am I rushing because I need to, or because I don't know who I am without the rush? Tomorrow, before you dive into another cycle of busy, take 2 minutes, breathe, get quiet, and ask yourself what truly matters today. Not everything, just one thing. Do it with care, do it with calm. Watch how it shifts everything. Because when you stop sprinting, you finally have time to see the path clearly. When you move with grace instead of force, life begins to flow. And just like Zara discovered, the slower you go, the smoother things become. And the smoother they become, the faster you get to where you were meant to be. Every Sunday morning in Seattle, Chris wakes up to the sound of small feet padding down the hallway. Elijah, his 5-year-old son, is already wide awake, ready for their ritual, pancakes. Not the kind you post on Instagram. These are lumpy, a little uneven, often sprinkled with too many blueberries because Elijah insists on pouring them in himself. The kitchen gets messy. There's flour on the floor, syrup on the counter, and usually a few burned edges on the first batch. But Chris wouldn't trade these mornings for anything, because for a long time his mornings were silent. After his divorce, Chris found himself drowning in the quiet of shared custody days. The apartment felt empty, and though he buried himself in work, he couldn't shake the feeling that something essential was missing. Not success, not stability, but joy. Joy without pressure. Joy without performance. It wasn't until Elijah tugged at his hand one Sunday and said, "Let's make pancakes like we're on a cooking show," that something softened in Chris. They set up their pretend camera. They gave each other silly chef names. They narrated every step. That morning wasn't just fun, it was healing. Gratitude has a way of sneaking in like that. Not through grand moments, but through quiet ones that ask nothing of you but presence. In a world that screams more, choosing to say, "This is enough," feels almost rebellious. But that rebellion might be the most sacred thing you ever do. Chris began keeping a journal. Not every day, not religiously, but honestly. He didn't list generic things like family or health. He wrote about the little details. The way Elijah pronounces spatula like it's a magical word. The way sunlight hits the kitchen sink at 9 a.m. The moment of stillness before the kettle whistles. And slowly, these small acknowledgments turned into anchors. No matter how chaotic the week became, he had evidence, written proof, that life was still beautiful in its smallest corners. He also started a practice with Elijah. Every Sunday, after their pancake mess, they'd each say one thing they were thankful for from the past week. Sometimes it was as simple as the playground slide or my new markers. Sometimes it was deeper. One morning, Elijah said, "I'm glad you smiled more this week." That broke Chris open in the best way. We often think of gratitude as a soft concept, something nice but not powerful. But what if it's actually the strongest muscle we have? What if learning to see what's already good is the first step in attracting more of it? The Stoics believed this fiercely. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." They weren't anti-ambition, they were anti-restlessness. They believed joy was already here, not hidden behind the next achievement. Chris didn't stop striving. He still worked hard, still had goals, but he stopped attaching his happiness to outcomes. He started measuring wealth in laughter, in peace, in pancake mornings. And strangely, as his gratitude deepened, so did his creativity. His work improved. His conversations became more open. People noticed. Gratitude didn't make his life perfect. It made it real, and maybe that's the shift we all need. Maybe the reason we feel so burned out isn't because we lack achievement, but because we lack awareness of what's already going right. If you're reading this thinking, "But my life is messy, there's too much going wrong," I hear you. But look again. Is there someone who checked in on you this week? A song that gave you chills? A cup of coffee that hit just right? That's your starting point. Gratitude isn't about ignoring what's hard. It's about refusing to ignore what's still good. Try this. Once a week, pick 3 things you're grateful for. Not because they're big, but because they're real. Then ask yourself, how do these things help you become the person you want to be? Chris did that. And in doing so, he discovered that joy isn't rare. It's just quiet. And it waits for those who create space to hear it. You don't have to wait for your life to look different to feel grateful. You just have to look differently at the life you already have. That shift might be the very thing that unlocks everything you've been chasing. Nina never imagined that something as simple as digging her hands into soil would teach her more about growth than 10 years in the tech industry ever had. When she left her UX job in San Francisco, she wasn't chasing clarity, she was running from collapse. Burnout had wrapped itself around her so tightly that she couldn't breathe without feeling behind. Everything she once loved about her career, creativity, problem solving, team collaboration, had turned into noise, metrics, deadlines, and panic. So she left. Not forever, she told herself. Just long enough to find her pulse again. She signed up for a volunteer program in Patagonia, working with a local permaculture farm. No Wi-Fi, no meetings, no just checking in emails. Just land, people, and routine. The first few weeks were brutal. Her hands ached, her body was sore. Her mind, addicted to stimulation, kept reaching for a phone that wasn't there. But something remarkable started happening. Not fast, not dramatic, but steady. Every morning they'd begin with the same task, planting. The farmers explained how some seeds don't sprout for weeks, and even when they do, the real work is happening underground. Roots stretching, soil adjusting, moisture balancing. From the surface, it looks like nothing, but below, everything is moving. That concept hit Nina harder than she expected. Back home, she had always measured her worth by visible results. What's shipped, what's delivered, what's praised. But here, life followed its own rhythm. It didn't care about KPIs. It moved when it was ready. One afternoon, while planting carrots, she asked the lead farmer how they knew things were growing if they couldn't see anything yet. The man smiled, rubbed the dirt from his hands and said, "You don't wait for signs. You trust the system. The seed knows what to do." Nina carried those words like a prayer. For the first time in years, she started trusting herself again. Not because she had answers, but because she was learning to be patient with the process. She woke up each morning without needing to achieve something. She just showed up, fully, gently, consistently. And in that rhythm, she discovered a strange kind of joy. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that hums quietly beneath the surface. When she returned to California months later, she didn't rush back into her old life. Instead, she gave herself space. She started a small consultancy built around her values. Fewer clients, deeper work. No growth hacks, just good design that solved real problems. And every time she felt the panic creeping in, the urge to see instant results, to force something into bloom, she reminded herself, the root grows first. Trusting the process isn't easy, especially in a culture that idolizes immediacy. We've been trained to see silence as failure, delay as defeat. But real change, real impact, it takes time. It happens in the quiet, in the invisible. The Stoics lived by this truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Nature doesn't check for applause. It doesn't measure itself against timelines. It simply does what it was created to do, again and again, until one day, what was hidden becomes undeniable." Nina's story isn't unique because she found success again. It's powerful because she learned to redefine what success meant. Not speed, not perfection, but alignment. Showing up each day, doing the work, and releasing the need to control the outcome. And maybe that's where your next breakthrough lives. Not in a burst of action, but in a quiet, unseen effort. A seed you plant today without knowing when or how it will bloom. So if you're in a season of waiting, take heart. Just because you can't see the growth doesn't mean it's not happening. Trust the preparation, trust the habits, trust the moments of silence where nothing seems to move, because those are the moments your roots are digging deepest. Chapter. Don't need to push harder. You need to align deeper. And if you do, if you trust that your process has a purpose, you'll find that what you've been hoping for isn't just possible. It's already on its way. Just beneath the surface. Just waiting for the right time to rise. Liam, Rachel, Zara, Chris, Nina. Their stories, though different in detail, echo a universal truth, one we often overlook in the noise and urgency of modern life. Each of them, in their own way, were chasing something: control, validation, growth, balance, fulfillment. But instead of finding peace through more effort, they each arrived at it through less resistance. Liam learned to stop gripping so tightly and discovered that letting go wasn't a collapse. It was clarity. Rachel quieted her chaos not by fixing everything overnight, but by sorting her thoughts and giving herself permission to be present with the problem. Zara slowed down and finally remembered what her work felt like when it was rooted in joy, not speed. Chris discovered that wealth wasn't in promotions or possessions. It was in pancake mornings and unfiltered laughter with his son. And Nina, through the patience of planting literal seeds, finally understood that growth often happens invisibly and only reveals itself when we stop trying to rush it. Together, these stories form a quiet revolution, a movement back to meaning. A call to remember that calm is not the enemy of progress, it's the foundation of it. What ties all of this together is something deeply Stoic yet profoundly modern. Your peace is not found in the external, not in the perfect job, the next goal, or the perfect morning routine. Your peace lives inside the choices you make daily. To pause instead of panic, to breathe instead of break, to listen instead of react. So, what's the lesson here? It's this: the life you're trying so hard to create doesn't begin when everything finally falls into place. It begins the moment you start showing up differently, with intention, with awareness, with trust. You don't have to escape to the mountains to reset. You don't need a sabbatical or a massive life change to start over. You just need a small daily commitment to create space. Space in your mind, your routine, your relationships, for the life you actually want to live. Try this. Start your morning with stillness instead of a screen. Write one sentence about what matters today. Go for a walk without your phone. Say thank you for something ordinary. Trust that the effort you're making, though it may feel invisible, is building something extraordinary. That's how real transformation begins. Quietly, internally, and often without applause. Now let me ask you this. Which mindset do you think leads to a more fulfilling life? A. Pushing harder and controlling every detail. B. Letting go, focusing on presence, and trusting the process. Comment your answer below, A or B, and let's start a conversation. Your insight might just help someone else see their life differently. And, while you're at it, tell me, what part of this journey spoke to you most? Was it Liam's surrender, Rachel's clarity, Zara's slow creation, Chris's gratitude, or Nina's trust in the unseen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other. If this story moved something inside you, inspired you, or made you pause even for a moment, consider subscribing to this channel. It's your support that helps bring more stories like this to life. Real stories that don't just entertain, but expand us. We've got so much more ahead. Let's walk this path together.